In this video, I'll be reviewing the Crash Bandicoot and Sane Trilogy on the Nintendo Switch. Now, I'm not going to talk a lot about Crash Bandicoot series just because I kind of already did a review of the Sane Trilogy back on the PS4 when it came out last year. So I'm going to be briefly talking about it, but mainly this video is going to be about some of the differences between the Nintendo Switch version and some of the other versions that are currently out on the market. Now, really quickly, if you don't know anything about Crash Bandicoot is a 2.5D platformer where you're pretty much just going around jumping on boxes, spinning enemies, and jumping over gaps and things like that. Now, they do try to mix up the gameplay when it comes to Crash Bandicoot. Sometimes you'll be riding animals, like in the first game you're riding a hog, or maybe you'll be running away from a boulder, or maybe you'll also be underwater in some instances, or you'll be riding a jet ski. So they do try to throw some different stuff at you than just your average generic platforming, which I absolutely think is pretty nice, considering you kind of want to break up the monotony of just breaking crates, spinning enemies, and jumping over gaps. So it is nice to do have that variety there. Now, in the Crash Bandicoot and Sane Trilogy, you do get 3 full games. So you get Crash Bandicoot 1, Crash Bandicoot 2, Cortex Strikes Back, and then you also get Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped. So you get 3 full games here. And I must say, this might be the best value on the Nintendo Switch. I'm just going to say that right now. In my opinion, I think it's priced at $40. That's the same price as a new Nintendo 3DS game. Honestly, I'm kind of puzzled why Vicarious Visions and Activision didn't make the Crash Bandicoot and Sane Trilogy $60, because I feel like they could have easily made this a full price release at $60, but some reason they decided to make this release only $40, and you're getting a lot for your money. First of all, you can just go ahead and complete these games normally, but also if you want to try to 100% each game, you can try to 100% each game. And let me tell you, 100%ing each Crash Bandicoot game is going to be a chore. So if you want to work for that 100% completion, you can do this in every single game. And there's just a lot of content there to enjoy in the Crash Bandicoot and Sane Trilogy. Honestly, really worth $40. Now let's pretty much go ahead and talk about some of the differences between the Nintendo Switch version of the Crash Bandicoot series compared to some of the other platforms, because this is a multi-platform game. Right now, you can pick up the Sane Trilogy on different platforms. It's pretty much on every single platform right now. So it's on PS4, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and even Steam at the moment. So what are you going to be getting when you buy the Sane Trilogy on the Nintendo Switch? Well, of course, you're going to be getting that portability. So if the biggest thing for you is portability and you want to take the Sane Trilogy on the go, then of course you're going to want to buy this on the Nintendo Switch. Now, how does this actually run on the Nintendo Switch? Because of course, as most of you know out there, most games on the Nintendo Switch usually take some kind of hit when they're on the Nintendo Switch. And honestly, I can confirm Crash Bandicoot and Sane Trilogy on the Nintendo Switch is one game that sadly does take a hit when you're actually playing it on the Nintendo Switch. For starters, if you're going to be playing this on the TV, you're going to be playing this at 720p. 30 frames per second. Now, 30 frames per second is not going to be specific to the Switch version. Every single version on consoles are going to be 30 frames per second, whether you're playing that on the Switch, the Xbox One, or the PS4. If you want to play anything above 30 frames per second, then you will have to play this on a PC, on Steam. That's where you can get this game to run at 60 frames per second. But when you're actually playing this on any console, including Switch, again, you're going to be running this game at 30 frames per second. Does this game actually suffer from 30 frames per second? No. In my opinion, this game does not suffer from 30 frames per second. I honestly think that it's not really going to bother you that this game runs at 30 frames per second. Sure, if you were to play this on Steam and then go back to the console versions of this game, then you may notice the difference in the actual frame rate of the game, but just playing this on its own, I don't think 30 frames per second is going to be a big deal with this collection. A lot of the times when you're actually missing platforms, or when the hitboxes are wrong on some enemies, it's going to be due to the fact that Crash Bandicoot always had this weird problem when it comes to depth perception, especially in the first game specifically, much more than the rest of the series, where sometimes you'll be jumping over a gap and sometimes you won't be able to tell if the depth perception's right, or maybe you won't be able to tell some enemies' hitboxes, but that's not really a frames per second deal. That just has to do with the fact that they didn't really update these games with new mechanics or new things. They pretty much just took the original games and pretty much threw on a new paint job, but they really didn't fix some of the problems the Crash Bandicoot series has. Now, Crash Bandicoot really doesn't have a lot of problems, but it does have this whole weird depth perception problem like I just explained. Also, I do have to note that there is one problem with the Crash Bandicoot collection on the Nintendo Switch you may want to be aware of if you're thinking about picking it up on the Nintendo Switch. One problem the Nintendo Switch version has of this collection is the fact that when you're actually playing this game, there is some kind of weird 2 or I think 3 second delay, which does kind of suck. Is it noticeable? No, it's not really noticeable for most people, and I'm pretty sure if you played this game you wouldn't even know that this does have a slight delay, but there is a slight delay where I think the other console versions of this game does not have a slight delay. And on top of it being 720p 30 frames per second, you can kind of tell that this game, at least in TV mode, in some areas doesn't look as good as some of the other consoles. One thing I do want to point out, which I'm not sure if this is related to the Crash Bandicoot series on Switch or if this related to some other games out there that have this problem, but I realized switching TVs from this game, it is really noticeable that this game kind of runs at 720p. When I played this on a standard 1080p TV, it looks just fine. I can't even really honestly tell that this game runs at 720p. When I'm playing this on a strictly 1080p monitor or a TV, it looks like it is a 1080p game. Pretty impressive stuff, right? But then when I go to a 4K TV, for some reason, I don't know if the resolution is just much more greater than 1080p, but for some reason, that's where I start really noticing that the Crash Bandicoot and Sane Trilogy on the Nintendo Switch is really 720p. I can start seeing more of the imperfections in the whole graphics. So maybe if you're thinking about playing this game, if you can get a hold of this game, you kind of want to try this on your own TV. Will it really bother you? It just depends if you're a graphics whore that really is bothered by resolutions and things like that. It really just depends, but I just wanted to throw that out there because I've been switching different monitors and different TVs playing the Crash Bandicoot Sane Trilogy, and I can notice the difference between graphics. It gets more milkier when I'm playing on a 4K set compared to just a standard 1080p thing. And it also, of course, depends on what type of TV you have. Do you have LCD, OLED, IPS, just different things like that. So that can also factor in, but I just wanted to point that out because I did actually have that problem. Now, how does this game actually run in handheld mode? Because, of course, you want to play this game in handheld mode if you buy this on the Nintendo Switch, and that is going to be the biggest advantage this game has on the Nintendo Switch over any other console or even the PC. So how did this run in handheld mode? Well, I've played this quite a few times in handheld mode to get a kind of gist of how this plays in handheld mode. And let me tell you guys, this game actually plays really good in handheld mode. It's not actually matching this Switch's screen, which is 720p in handheld mode. It actually takes a hit. It's actually a little bit lower than 720p, which is kind of unfortunate, but I'm telling you, when you're actually playing this game does look good in handheld mode, and I can confirm this game does look better than a Nintendo 3DS game, because I know you might be wondering, since it took a hit, how did this actually play in handheld mode? Well, it looks great, and it looks better than any 3DS game I've ever played, so don't worry about it in handheld mode. It looks very great, and you'll probably have a very fun time in handheld mode. Overall, the Crash Bandicoot Sane Trilogy on the Nintendo Switch is a very good port of the Sane Trilogy. It has its problems here and there, of course. It's 720p when you play on a TV, and then when you play in handheld mode, of course, you lose some resolution. Some of the texturing's not that great. There is a 2 or 3 second delay when you're moving Crash Bandicoot for some odd reason, but overall, this is a really good really good port to the Nintendo Switch. And if you've never played Crash Bandicoot, or if you have played Crash Bandicoot, the cool thing is too, we are getting 2 free levels. Now, one level did come out last year when it came out on the PS4. It was a Stormy Ascent, I think, or Stormy something. It was one of the levels that was actually cut from the original Crash Bandicoot game, Crash Bandicoot 1, and then they brought it in as DLC. But now we also got Future Tense, which is part of Crash 3 Warped, so we have that to play with, and that level is free. So you're getting 2 free levels here when you pick up this collection. Overall, this is a very good collection on the Nintendo Switch. Of course, this is not the best way to play it. If you want the best way to play it, then you're still going to have to play on PC. PC is still going to be the best way to play the Crash Bandicoot and Sane Trilogy with 4K resolution and a locked 60 frames per second. So you can't play 4K 60 frames per second on PC if you have bought the Crash Bandicoot and Sane Trilogy. But overall, a very good port of the Crash Bandicoot and Sane Trilogy. Anyway, guys, this is Wayne from My Tech News, signing out.